Your toddler just said no. Again. You asked a simple question. You made a perfectly reasonable request. And the answer was no. It is always no. No to breakfast. No to shoes. No to the bath they loved yesterday. No to leaving the park. No to staying at the park. Just, no. You might think something is wrong. You might wonder if this is defiance. If it is a phase. If you somehow created a tiny tyrant who will grow up arguing with everyone for the rest of their life. But here is the thing. The real answer to why toddlers say no so relentlessly is not what most parents believe. And once you understand what is actually happening inside that small, furious brain, you will never hear the word the same way again. The no is not the problem. The no is the solution. Your toddler is not broken. Your toddler is building something. To understand what that something is, you have to go back. Not just to infancy. Further. You have to think about what it means to be a human being who has arrived in a world they did not choose, cannot control, and barely understand. For the first 12 months of life, your child experienced total dependency. Every meal, every movement, every moment of comfort came from someone else. The world acted upon them. They had no say in any of it. Imagine waking up one day and realizing, slowly, that you exist. That you are a separate person. That there is a you, and then there is everything else. That is what happens somewhere around 18 months to 2 years of age. Developmental psychologists call this the emergence of the self. And the first tool the newly emerged self reaches for is the word no. Jean Piaget, the Swiss developmental psychologist whose work fundamentally changed how we understand children's minds, described toddlerhood as the period when children first begin to construct their own reality. Not just absorb the world around them, but push back against it. Test it. Shape it. The no is not rebellion. It is the first act of authorship. Think about what the word no actually does. It establishes a boundary between self and world. It signals that there is an opinion here, a preference, a will that exists separately from the people around it. When your toddler screams no at a bowl of oatmeal, they are not really talking about oatmeal. They are saying, I exist. I have preferences. I am separate from you. That is an enormous developmental milestone dressed up as a breakfast argument. But why does the no feel so total? So relentless? Why does it seem to apply to everything, even things the child clearly wants? Neuroscience gives us a precise answer, and it lives in a part of the brain your toddler barely has access to yet. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, impulse regulation, weighing consequences, and flexible thinking, does not fully develop until a person is in their mid-20s. In a 2-year-old, it is almost entirely offline. What is online, firing at full strength, is the limbic system. The emotional engine. The part of the brain that reacts first and thinks never. What this means practically is that your toddler is not capable of saying, I understand that you are asking me to put on my shoes, and while I would prefer not to, I recognize that we have somewhere to be and this is a reasonable expectation. That sentence requires a prefrontal cortex. What they can do is feel the sudden sensation of having something imposed on them, feel the pull of their newly discovered autonomous will, and respond to that feeling immediately. And the response is no. Adele Diamond, a neuroscientist at the University of British Columbia who has spent decades studying executive function in children, has shown that the ability to inhibit a strong impulse, to feel the urge to say no and override it, is one of the last cognitive capacities to develop in human beings. Your toddler is not choosing to be difficult. They are operating at the literal limit of what their brain can currently do. Here is where it gets more interesting. The no is not random. It is not applied equally to all situations. It appears most frequently in a very specific context, when the child feels their autonomy is being threatened. And the more capable the child becomes, the more they can walk, talk, reach, open, climb, choose, the more sensitive they become to anything that feels like that capability being overridden. This is why the no can intensify right around age 2, just when you might expect a child who is developing rapidly to become easier to reason with. The opposite happens. Because the more they can do, the more they want to decide. The gap between what they can do and what they are allowed to decide feels like a wound. And the word no is how they press on it. Greene, a clinical psychologist and the author of The Explosive Child, has argued for decades that what looks like defiance in young children is almost always the result of a mismatch between the demands being placed on a child and the skills that child currently possesses. Toddlers, he argues, are not choosing to be difficult. They are failing to meet a demand, and that failure comes out as a refusal before it ever becomes a negotiation. The no is the only tool they have. Now here is the counterintuitive part. The no is healthy. The no is necessary. Children who are never allowed to say no, whose every refusal is immediately overridden, punished, or extinguished, do not learn compliance. They learn helplessness. They learn that their internal states do not matter, that their preferences have no place in the world, that the way to survive is to suppress whatever arises inside them and do what they are told. And that lesson, absorbed early enough, does not produce easy children. It produces children who cannot regulate themselves, cannot advocate for themselves, and cannot trust their own instincts. The no is practice. Every time your toddler says no and you acknowledge that refusal, not necessarily comply with it, but acknowledge it, you are teaching them that their inner experience is real. That it counts. That it is possible to feel something strongly and express it without the world ending. You are teaching them that relationships survive disagreement. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most important things a person can learn. But how do you live with it? How do you parent a small human who seems constitutionally opposed to everything you suggest, without losing your mind or giving them full control of the household? The answer lies in autonomy architecture. Not giving toddlers everything they want, but engineering situations where the no has a place to land that does not derail the day. Instead of a command, put your shoes on, there is a choice. Do you want the red shoes or the blue shoes? The shoes are happening either way. But the child gets to author one part of the experience. The no has been structurally preempted. What rushes in to fill its place is something more powerful, yes. Yes to the red ones. Yes to this small act of agency. The brain that was bracing for a fight relaxes, because the fight never became necessary. Research on what developmental psychologists call psychological need satisfaction shows that children who are given regular, genuine opportunities to make small choices, not fake choices, not choices without consequences, but real selections between real options, show lower rates of defiant behavior and higher rates of cooperative behavior over time. The no does not disappear. But it stops being the only tool available because the environment has provided others. This does not mean toddlers should get everything they ask for. Boundaries are not the enemy of the no. In fact, consistent, calm, predictable boundaries are what make the no safe. A child who is never met with a firm limit does not feel more powerful. They feel less safe. They escalate the no, looking for the wall that will hold. They need to know the world has edges. Your steadiness as a parent, I hear you, and we are still doing this, teaches them that structure and love are not opposites. There is something else to understand about the no that most parents never hear. The no often arrives in advance of language that would make the actual feeling expressible. Your toddler is not saying no because they are unreasonable. They are saying no because no is the only word big enough, the only word available, to contain whatever is happening inside them right now. They might be tired. They might be overwhelmed. They might have just had too many transitions, too many new faces, too many things happening without warning. The no is the overflow valve. And when you look underneath it, when you ask yourself what this child actually needs right now, not what they are asking for, you often find something surprisingly simple. A moment of stillness. A familiar routine. A face they know. You. The philosopher Alison Gopnik, whose research at the University of California, Berkeley has reshaped how scientists think about early learning, describes young children as more like systems designed to explore than systems designed to perform. Toddlers are not trying to obey. They are trying to understand. The no is part of that understanding. What happens when I refuse? Does the world change? Does the relationship survive? Does the person in front of me stay? Can I trust that what I feel matters to someone else? When you manage the no with patience, not perfection, patience, you are answering all of those questions at once. So the next time your toddler looks you in the eye and says no to the snack you made, to the nap they need, to the reasonable request you repeated for the 4th time, try to hear what is underneath it. Not defiance. Not manipulation. Not a prediction about the kind of person they are becoming. Hear the emergence. The first draft of a self that is learning it exists, learning it has preferences, learning that it is separate from you and connected to you at the same time. That is what the no is doing. That is what it has always been doing. Your toddler is not saying no to you. Your toddler is saying yes, for the very first time, to themselves.